911, what's your emergency? 911, what's your emergency?
Be advised, Car 4 has control of the pursuit. Proceed with caution.
Hello, everyone. How are you guys all doing this evening? And so good to see all of you. Hey, Rob Lee, how are you? Welcome, welcome. Hey, John, good to have you, my dear. Hey, Melissa, how are you doing? Hi, Danger Dave, how are you? Hello, James. Welcome. Hi, Josh, how are you? Nice to see you. Hey, Sees Through. Hi, Shane. How are you doing? Hey, David Gray, how are you? Hi, True Crime Housewife. How are you guys doing? It's good to see everyone tonight. Hopefully, we won't have any storms. It's pretty quiet here. So we won't have any more tornado warnings tonight. So, hey, Chris. How are you doing? Yeah, we're going to talk about it. Hey, Maria. Hi, my dear. How are you? It's so good to see you. Big hugs. We've all missed you. So I hope everybody is hanging in there and had a good start to your week. Spring is definitely sprung here. The leaves are popping. The grass is all green. It's just beautiful. The birds are all showing up. The dandelions are in bloom. So the bees have their first food of the spring. Hey, Jerry Jones, how are you? Good to see you. So, yeah, we're going to talk about Richard Allen tonight. We're going to talk about the Delphi murders. And I know it seems like there's not a lot to talk about in the case, but I think every time I say that, there's something else that I think about that I want to talk about with the case. So we are going to just talk about Delphi tonight. I've got a little bit of things to go over as like housekeeping kind of stuff, but hey, Lynn GMV, how are you? Good to see you. I thank everyone who's been watching, watching the videos on replay. Seems like I'm getting a lot of replay watching, which is good. And I've also noticed that I've got a lot of people watching during the day on replay, which is one of the reasons that I'm going to start doing a live stream at least once a week during the daytime. Hey, Rescue All the Dogs. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. So, so much has gone on this past week, and there's been a lot of talk, and we've had numerous discussions in here about, hey, that's interesting. How are you? Good to see you. There is a lot to talk about with the case and some of the things that have happened. And yes, Francis Gall did finally rule on the motion from Richard Allen's defense team and basically stated that the safekeeping order could be modified and that based upon the prison's psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors, medical staff, they could, per their recommendations, move him if need be. There has been a couple of different rumors that are floating around. I have heard nothing official, but they're stating one of the rumors was that he was going to be moved to Cass County, which is across, the jail is across the street from his attorney, one of his attorneys. And that's where they asked to have him moved. But there's another thing that's out there that's saying that he was actually moved to Miami County at Grissom and the jail that's out at Grissom. And from what I understand, there are a couple of different holding facilities at Grissom, and they do have one that is super safe. It's a super, it's not maximum security, but it's a high security. So it's kind of interesting as to where he really is. And I think we're just going to have to wait and see. Once he is finally moved, I think it will be, it will leak to where he is, just like it did. So that's what we know at this point in time. And Rob Lee is absolutely correct. Because he is innocent until proven guilty, as anybody is in our country in this judicial system. And we cannot lose sight of that. We don't have lynch mobs in this country anymore. We don't go and pull people out of their homes and throw them into prison and throw away the key. We don't do that. Just because you've been arrested does not mean you are guilty of a crime. Hey, Mitzi, how are you? So I don't think that Richard Allen is a danger of escape. I think he's a danger to himself at this point in time. That's what I would be most concerned about, is that he's deteriorating and that whether or not he would harm himself. So anyway, we don't know what his mental status was prior to his arrest. And I mentioned that to someone earlier this week that I was discussing this with. We can make all the assumptions that we want about him, but we don't know if Richard Allen actually had a mental diagnosis that he was being treated for prior to being arrested, and whether or not he was still getting treatment for that condition that he may have had while he's been incarcerated. A lot of times things like that fall through the cracks. And these guys may have been on meds. And if he was on depression medicine, or he was on anti-anxiety medicine, or whatever the case may be, to have him come off those medicines suddenly can cause all kinds of issues. And all I'm saying is that I want this man healthy to stand trial. I want him to be in a good frame of mind to stand trial for these crimes. We just don't know. There are rumors out there that he went to some sort of a mental facility or a treatment facility right directly after the murders. We don't know if this is true. There has been speculation that Richard Allen has a drinking problem. There's no confirmation of any of this. So we can't just throw things out at the wind and say blatantly that this is true and this is true when we don't have those kinds of facts. But the fact is, he's innocent until he's proven guilty in a court of law. So getting through that's kind of what I've heard. As far as Chris's question about the trial, you're not going to see a trial anytime soon. I don't look for a trial this year. I would be surprised if there's a trial next year at the rate we're going. That's just how I feel right now. These cases that are this kind of big and that has this kind of discovery and everything, they can take a long time to come to trial. They can take years. So don't be surprised. I don't want people to lose sight of that we may be waiting a while. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about before we get into the case tonight, that I don't know if you guys have heard about, but I wanted to talk about this. The charges in the Michael Vaughn case that were against Sarah Wandra, I posted this today on the community page. Don't know if you guys saw it or not, but Sarah Wandra was arrested last year in connection with the disappearance of Michael Vaughn in Fruitland and Idaho, and was charged with failure to report a death to the coroner. And after a motion to dismiss was filed on April 14th this year, those charges have now been dropped, according to the Argus Observer. The charges were dismissed on motion of the state, which means the prosecutor who brought the original charges was the one who motioned the court to drop them. The charges were dropped without prejudice, which means they can be refiled and still moved to trial at any time. Sometimes this happens when officials are seeking more time to make a case stronger, find more evidence, or question other witnesses, and that could be what's going on here. The Fruitland Police Chief, J.D. Huff, told CBS 2 that this doesn't change the course of the investigation and that the entire case will be forwarded to the Payette County prosecutor very soon. CBS 2 reached out to the prosecutor's office for comment, but they have not responded at the time that this article came out with the report. So I just wanted to keep everybody up to date on that. It is super important that Michael Vaughn gets justice. They do believe that he's deceased, and I just can't believe this is happening, and it's really bothersome to me. But anyway, I hear ya. I hear you, Dave. I hear you. I hear you. Hey, help me, Rhonda. How are you? Good to see you. Hi, Indy Pam. Thanks for coming. Good to have you here as always. So I was just, like I said, floored about that whole stuff, and a lot. There was breaking news this afternoon. I wanted to let everybody know about this in case you were following this case. But there was the police yesterday confirmed that a body that was found in Maryland, in a Maryland quarry, is actually a missing 10-year-old girl. This was in Carroll County, Maryland. On April 15th at 6 p.m., officers responded to the 3900 block of Turner Road in Brandywine, Maryland, for the report of a missing 10-year-old girl, Madeline Wallace. She had autism and was nonverbal. It just breaks my heart. I have a grandson who is autistic, and he was nonverbal until he was 5 years old. So I can understand this whole scenario, and the fear that we had of losing him was unbelievable. Patrol officers, additional CCSO staff, search and rescue, law enforcement partners from across the region, Carroll County Fire, EMS, and numerous volunteers from the K-9 organizations around the region responded and established a strategic search. The search led to an area about a mile away from where Madeline was last seen, which was heavily wooded with numerous quarries. Evidence was observed that Madeline had been in that area, and the search focused on a 25-foot deep, water-filled quarry. Members of Carroll County Dive Rescue responded, and they did locate Madeline deceased in that quarry. She was transported to the office of the chief medical examiner in Baltimore, where she was positively identified this morning, and the cause of death was ruled as a drowning. The Carroll County Sheriff's Office Victim Witness Service Coordinator responded to the scene and are working with Madeline's family to provide resources. It is a sad, sad story. Just so sad for it to end that way for that family. Just terrible. So one of the things, I'm going to go over the timeline. As my thumbnails described today, the timeline does not lie. In any murder, law enforcement has to create a timeline. They have to know minute to minute what happened before the crime and after the crime. They're looking at all of the movements of the deceased individuals and what they were doing, who they may have had contact with, and all of that. So they create this timeline. The probable cause document for Richard Allen's arrest gave us a really good timeline. We finally got a timeline that actually is from law enforcement. For all these nearly 6 years, the only thing we had was a timeline that had been created on social media by various individuals who claimed to have sources, who claimed to have talked with witnesses. And then we had the conversations that were made and taken by the family members. And as we all know, and we've talked about this so much on my channel, it is hard in the moments of trauma to remember exact things that you never thought you would have to remember. Time, what people were wearing, things like that. It's just, those are things that you just don't, stop and ask yourself, would you remember what you wore 3 or 4 days ago? Would you remember what a friend of yours wore 3 or 4 days ago? Those are things that you don't save space for in your memory because there's just too many other important things to remember. Those are not things that we, as human beings, our brains just don't work that way. So it's understandable to me that some of the timeline that we were following was off and that things happened later than we thought they did. And I always wondered about the timeline because we never had anything that was definitive from law enforcement. And it always bothered me. I agree, Rob. The Hoosier Harvest Store is one of the reasons that this case is going to make it to trial. Absolutely, 100%. Without that CCTV footage from their cameras, law enforcement would not have all the information that they needed. And we're talking about information that can be corroborated that eyewitnesses are stating. And so I think that is key here. It's one of the big things about this timeline is that we have this footage from the Hoosier Harvest Store. And it tells a lot. We'll get into this in a minute, I guess, but I want to talk about this too. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you first about this is we know what Richard Allen has been charged with. And we know based upon the charging documents and the probable cause affidavit, what the section of law in Indiana pertains to his charges. It outlined the charges for us, and it specifically states that the girls were murdered during a abduction and or kidnapping. But I want to clarify something, because when you go into the Justice Department's files and you are looking for definitions for kidnapping and abduction, they are actually two separate things. Kidnapping is usually accompanied with a ransom to money or other gains in some manner. where the crime of abduction is considered to be when a person uses fraud or some other means to persuade someone, a person, to be taken away from where they are. So wherever their original location was. And most of the time it's by fraud or it's done in a forceful manner with a weapon. And it sometimes definitely includes violence. So that's the difference between a kidnapping and an abduction. And that's why a lot of times when you were listening to the world news and they're talking about this child was abducted today in this place, they don't say this child was kidnapped, because kidnap usually has the connotation of a sum of money attached to it, or the perpetrator wants some sort of gain financially or something of value. So I just wanted to clarify that so people kind of understand what we're talking about here. And in the state of Indiana, if you are charged with felony murder, which Richard Allen has been, he wasn't charged with capital murder. It leads me to believe the reason for that is because they are more looking at the fact that he abducted the girls from the bridge and ordered them down the hill. And maybe that's what they are 100% sure they can prove. The girls died during an abduction. When the girls died during an abduction, that's how he was able to be charged with double homicide. So, we'll just have to wait and see if my thought on that is right, because I'm serious. They may have a lot more than what we know. I get a lot of questions about what I think the motive of this crime is and what I think was the reason that the girls were taken and abducted that day. And all I can tell you is that you can't get in the mind of a killer. You can't get into the mind of a person who does this type of crime sitting at home like I am. I have no interaction with this man. I have no way of knowing why Richard Allen would have taken the girls off of that bridge and ordered them down the hill. I have assumptions that I can make. I have theories that I can say this may have been or this may have been, but I don't know. The only person who knows that's still alive is him. I can tell you that I don't think it was for anything good, and that I think that there was something horribly wrong with what he was doing, and that he, in my opinion, was hoping either to have some sort of a sexual act with the girls, or he was actually intending on killing them. To me, it can't be one. It can't be either or. It's one or the other. And I have often thought that it's very possible that this could have been a sexual assault gone wrong, and that once the girls got away from him or ran from him, that he lost his control. It enraged him. and I mean really enraged this person. That's probably why there was such damage done to one of the victims versus one of the other victim. And we've talked about that. So that's kind of what I lean to in this case. I don't know that I'll ever know motive unless he decides at some point to tell. I do think that this is definitely a slam dunk case, in my opinion, for abduction. And since they died in the commission of that abduction, then yeah, I mean, I don't see, like I said, I don't see this person walking away from that. But with that being said, I think we need to look at this. Hang on a second, because I got a lot of notes here, you guys. You know me and my notes. So how does the timeline work, and why is the timeline so damning to Richard Allen's defense? Well, we've talked about it a number of different times, and we know that there are 3 juvenile witnesses that were on the trail that day between noon and 1:30 p.m. And they were walking on the trail west, heading back to the Freedom Bridge, when they encounter a white male between 1:36 p.m. and 1:30 p.m. I'm sorry, 1:40 p.m. I'm sorry. He is described by one of those witnesses as approximately 5'6" to 5'7", but no taller than 5'10". He was wearing boots, blue jeans, a blue jacket with a hoodie. He was walking towards the Monon High Bridge as if he knew where he was going. And he had something covering his lower face. One of the witnesses, the females, the 3 female juveniles, actually said hello or hi to him. And he looked right at her with a completely emotionless stare, like a glare. He never said a word. He just kept on walking. But she did say at one point that this made her uncomfortable. So uncomfortable that she actually told her mother about this incident. She later, or she also said he had brown hair, and that he was walking like he knew where he was going. There's another witness, a woman, and she arrives at the Mears entrance to these trails at 1:46 p.m. She did not see any vehicles in the lot at the Mears entrance when she pulls in. And she enters the trails and she heads straight down the 501 to the Monon High Bridge. And she arrives there shortly before 2 p.m. She tells investigators that she sees a white male on the first platform of the Monon High Bridge wearing blue jeans, a blue jacket, and a hoodie. And she was about 50 feet from where he was standing. She immediately turns back and heads to her car. And halfway there, she runs into Abby and Libby as they're making their way to the bridge. And this is at approximately 2 p.m. At 1:49 p.m., Kelsey German's car is seen on video surveillance arriving at the Mears lot. The witness leaves in her car and is captured driving past on video camera footage at 2:14 p.m. And she's going west, and she happens to see a car that is parked at the CPS building in an odd manner. It's backed in to that building, and she notates that. So another witness who we can assume, we're not sure, but we can assume is Brad Heath, saw a car also that was backed into the lot of the CPS building at approximately 2:10 p.m. And he stated, if you remember, early on, he was interviewed and said that there was a witness that saw something very suspicious that they felt that law enforcement needed to know about. So this would make this eyewitness Brad. His vehicle is also seen on camera driving past the Hoosier Heartland store at approximately 2:28 p.m. A fourth witness sees a male walking down 300 North around 3:57 p.m. And this person is walking west toward the CPS building. This witness described this man as a white male, and he was muddy and bloody and looked as though he had been in a fight. She was headed east towards the cemetery and Ron Logan's house. In February of 2017, we know that shortly after the murders that Richard Allen was interviewed by a conservation officer. What we don't know, and what's never been really clear on this, is whether or not Richard Allen approached him or if Richard Allen was approached by the conservation officer. Law enforcement hasn't told us any of this yet. But the conservation officer supposedly took down this information from Richard Allen about him being on the trails that day. Hey, Derek, how are you? Good to see you. Hey, Miss Siren, how are you? And we don't know for sure when the interview with the conservation officer took place, but we are able to assume that it was shortly thereafter the girls were found murdered. Richard Allen stated to the conservation officer, yeah, I was on the trails that day. I was there between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m. He claims that he parked at the old Farm Bureau building, which there is no old Farm Bureau building. That building is the CPS building. He states he saw 3 girls when he entered the trails that day. And that was around 1:30 p.m. He also said he had his phone with him. And as he walked from Freedom Bridge towards the Monon High Bridge, he was checking a stock ticker, is what he claimed. The videotape footage from the Hoosier Heartland store captures a vehicle that resembled Richard Allen's Ford Focus driving west on 300 North at 1:27 p.m. So this would corroborate his story. He claims he was looking at the stock ticker and that he went ahead and walked to the bridge and then walked out onto the first platform and was watching the fish below in the Deer Creek. Everything that he told the conservation officer, including what he stated that he was wearing that day, coincides with the corroborating witness testimony of all 4 of the witnesses. On October the 13th of 2022 last year, everything kind of blew up for Richard Allen. He is interviewed by investigators, and where they start asking him all kinds of questions about this crime. And he again admits his presence on the trails on February 13th, 2017 to officers. He said, though, that he walked back to the bench at the T between on the trails where the 501 and the 505 meet. And that's where the girls would have come in from the Mirrors parking lot. And that's also where the witness who saw him standing on the platform parked her car and came into the trails that day. There is a bench there under a tree. And he said he went and sat on that bench. The problem with that statement for Richard Allen is that absolutely there is no way he could have done that and not ran into Abby and Libby. Because we know the time stamp of everything that happened. We know when they arrived. We know who saw them. We know there was one witness that did see them. She passed them. And we know that that was around 2 o'clock or a very short time thereafter. He also told them that he was wearing blue jeans, a blue Carhartt coat or black, he couldn't remember, and he may have had on a hat. He wasn't sure either. He also told investigators he owned a Sig Sauer P226 revolver that was a .40 caliber. Now, there has been speculation almost since day one that Bridge Guy had a gun. There is also been no corroboration from law enforcement about a gun. There was nothing ever said. They withheld that information from the public. They withheld the information about the unspent shell casing of the .40 caliber unspent round that was found between both of the girls. They didn't let anybody know that information. And the reason that they didn't was for this very reason. Because they knew that the person who committed this crime would be the only person that could be associated with. There was no other explanation for why that evidence would be there. He goes on to tell them that he purchased this firearm legally in 2001. He doesn't ever share it with anyone. He doesn't let anyone else use it. And he knows where it is. It's never, something that's not where it's supposed to be. So he would never loan out his weapon. His wife also tells investigators when she's questioned that yes, her husband still owns a blue Carhartt jacket. Police write a search warrant, and they get a search warrant for Richard Allen's home. And they go inside and they bring out a whole bunch of items from his house. They take clothes, they take boxes of stuff. They're looking for all kinds of things, weapons, knives, everything that they can get. Well, they take his Sig Sauer for sure, because they end up taking that weapon to the crime lab along with the unspent shell casing that they had from the crime scene, and they compared them. And it was determined by the person who did the test that unspent shell casing was cycled through Richard Allen's Sig Sauer P 225. Or I'm sorry, 226. That became huge for the prosecution at that point. And that's when the prosecution knew that they had their man. They knew that this guy was their guy. He matched what they were looking for as far as clothing. He was the right size because they were looking for someone who was more on the bulkier side. And they were looking for someone who was shorter. And he fit those criteria. One of the 3 females that saw him when he first came into the trails said that he was barely taller than her. So she knew what height that would be because she obviously knows how tall she is. And he was barely taller than her. Hey, Frank Meister, how are you, my dear? So good to see you. So now we have the prosecution who are like, well, we have our guy. We have this timeline. We have been able to establish it. We have witnesses who we have interviewed, who have told us what times they were there and what times they were doing things and where they were at those times. And we have CCTV footage that corroborates all of that. Plus, we have this guy who's put himself at the crime scene between the hours of 1:30 and 3:30. We know that's when the girls were abducted. Not only that, but he puts himself on the bridge. He puts himself on the bridge, and he does not have enough time to go anywhere and not see Abby and Libby. There's just no way that this man went anywhere where he wouldn't have seen them, especially when he said that he walked back down the trail and sat on that bench. The timeline is incredibly tight, Derek. There's just no way. The man did not have time. We have this information. It's in the probable cause affidavit and the charging documents. And we know that law enforcement doesn't always tell the public the truth. They don't always tell us what is truly going on. They do it for a number of reasons. They do that so that The perpetrators of these crimes don't know what they know. They only want the person responsible to be able to tell them about these things. They don't want false confessions. If they put all this stuff out there into the public domain, crazy people are going to come forward and say that they're the ones who perpetrated the crime. It happens every day. I don't understand it. I will never understand why someone would admit to committing a crime they didn't do. I can't imagine wanting fame that bad that I would admit to killing someone. I think it's very interesting, Deborah, that you asked that question, because not only is there not a couple that was under the bridge, we have no verification that we have a flannel shirt guy there. We have no verification of a dog walking woman. There is no verification from law enforcement that Cheyenne was there. All of those things that we held close to our vest as truths and facts and factual timelines, none of that is in this document. And none of that talks about these people. And it just goes back to the fact that when there is a vacuum of information around a case, it's human nature to fill it. And it was everywhere. I mean, we had people saying that they were talking to this person and that person, and they were interviewing this person who was there, and this is what this person said, and all of these other things. The only thing we have that we know of is that Derek ran into someone in a flannel shirt on that trail when he went looking for Abby and Libby. Now, we don't know anything more than that. That's what's been told to us. But I do think it's very interesting that law enforcement does not speak about them at all. Any of those people in the charging document or in the probable cause. And, I mean, Derek is out there, he's searching, he's worried. His daughter isn't where she's supposed to be. He doesn't, that's out of character for Libby. She's always supposed to be there waiting whenever they set things up like this for him to pick her up. And so he was probably extremely worried, and wondering what in the heck was going on and where these girls could be. I don't think that it probably entered his mind of what had actually happened to them. I think he probably thought that they got lost, or maybe they were out farther down the trail. Maybe they went farther on the trail than they should have, and across the bridge and on that other side, and was walking or whatever and taking pictures and lost track of time. I mean, I don't really think that anybody thought for a moment what had happened to the girls had happened to them. This is not something that ever happened in this county. They just didn't have these types of crimes. Oh, hey, Dustin Andrew. Good to see you. There are so many things that just are out there. I was reading something when I was getting ready to put this live stream together. I was looking on Reddit, and I went back to some old, very old Reddit posts, and I was looking at stuff, and I can't believe all the things, all the little things that people were claiming and talking about. And the fact that this person was interviewed and said this. But the thing that got me the most is those Dave Erskine texts that everybody was talking about and was rushing around about on social media. And it is so easy to falsify that stuff. And I know that Anna came out and said that the texts were partially right or partially true. I would love it, Dustin. Please just email me again and we'll set up a time. I just can't do it right after I do a live stream. I just can't. It's just too much. I'm so sorry. But I would definitely like to have you be on. And if it happens to be on a different night or a different day other than my my live streams, I would be more than happy to do that. So I just want to remind everybody that all that stuff, all of those things that we heard and that we took as fact is just not fact, you guys. It's not. Unless you hear it from law enforcement, you really truly can't believe it. And then, depending on how we hear it from law enforcement, we still may not be able to believe it. But I believe when it's in court documents, you can believe it. Salty Beach, I do think that the case will go to trial. I think that he is seeing the writing on the wall. I definitely think that. I also think his defense attorneys may also be seeing that now that they're getting all of this throws and throws of paper with all of the discovery that's coming at them. They were real quick to come out and say that the case was weak. They said that before they ever saw the discovery. And, I don't think that probable cause affidavit was weak in any way, shape, or form. I think it bloody points right to him. And there's a lot of corroboration there, not only by witnesses, but by video footage. You can't really deny that. And like we said, it is so hard to deny a timeline when you can actually put it that close. This timeline is tight. It is really tight. There's not a lot of room to maneuver it. And sorry, I caught my hair on my ring. And not for somebody to be able to, hey, Miss Thang, how are you? So good to have you. Always better late than never. Always good to see you. So happy to have you. So we have been led to believe a lot of things in this case. And I don't know, when I break things down the way I did tonight, how anyone can still be on the fence about Richard Allen not being bridge guy. He's definitely bridge guy. There's just no way getting around it. He is bridge guy. And where it goes from there, we'll have to wait and see what the prosecution has beyond that point. But they really don't need more than that because of what we already said. They don't have to put him in the woods. They don't have to even really at this point put him over on the other side of the creek with the girls, because he's placed himself there. I think that people want to think and believe what they want. I have found by doing this case and following this case so closely for the last 6 years that, and Maria and I have talked about this at length for hours and hours over the last year, that people don't want to give up their POIs for whatever reason. They have their own idea in their mind of how this crime went down and who did it. And there is a fraction of people who absolutely today still will fight you to the nail, tooth and nail, that they don't think, who was it that just said that here? That half of Delphi doesn't think that it's him. Well, half of Delphi can think whatever they want. It's not up to half of Delphi to think anything. It's up to what can be proven. And I believe that the evidence against him is enough. And the conspiracy theorists that are out there, it's insane. I mean, seriously. I know for a long time we were all thinking this case is so complicated. There are so many twists and turns. I really don't think it's that complicated, you guys. I think they missed him. I think that they didn't see him in the beginning. And I believe that he hid and flew under their radar for 5.5 years. And Occam's razor is clear and to the point. It is not tons and tons of conspiracy going on out here. Most of the time, when you find these individuals that commit these kinds and types of crimes, they are going to look just like your neighbor next door, who you talk to at the grocery store and the gas station, who you go to church with every Sunday and sit next to in the pew, who you go to the CVS store and drop off your prescriptions to be filled and come back and pick up the Easter candy or the Christmas candy or whatever else it is that you might need from the CVS store. I'm serious. And Maria is right. They give every reasonable argument to suggest Richard Allen's potential innocence and lack of evidence, but willing to accuse others with way less evidence or even none at all. If you can't put your POI on that bridge and place them there with a timeline, you don't have evidence. You have no evidence. And it's, that is what I think was so hard for a lot of us with the whole Kagan Klein and that whole scenario. We know for a fact that Richard Allen has ties to Peru. He worked in Peru, Indiana at the CVS store. We know that. So, Dave, you know what? They could put that out there, something about good news, just because they want people to latch on to that's watching the trial and watching this whole case, to make us wonder, just like you're doing, what it is. I think the good news to Richard Allen is that Richard Allen was going to get moved out of Westville Correctional Center and move somewhere else. I think that's the good news. But going back to the fact that he has connections in Peru, you guys, the fact that he worked there, he knew people from there because of working there. And that is what may very well have led investigators to that river search. It may have not had anything to do with the Kleins. It was all about Richard Allen. And we don't know what they found. And Rob, you are so right. Everybody wants to believe they're smarter than the police force that's out there doing this job every single day. And they have 10 times the evidence that we've seen. They know all of the interviews they've done, who they've spoken to, who has witnessed something and who hasn't. We don't know any of that. And does the defense have things that they are going to be able to fight for in court? Most definitely. Are they going to be able to try to suppress evidence? Most definitely. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, CJK, when I'm talking about people who won't give up their POIs. It's really interesting to me. They have nothing that they can do to prove that. I guarantee you, if they could have proven that it was Ron Logan, they would have done that 5 years ago. So, the defense they've got things that they can use to help Richard Allen in this. Now, whether or not the court is going to allow it or let it in, those are all things that we have to wait to see. But I can tell you that if they start going at social media, all these people that have been so good at continuing to scream the narrative of it not being Richard Allen and it being someone else, all that's doing is playing into the defense's hand. That's all that's doing. It doesn't help the case whatsoever. It taints a jury. But there's been so many suspects talked about on social media, and there's only a handful that we know of that law enforcement actually looked at. So we don't know who and what law enforcement looked at. We know of a few. But that's it. Hi, Julianne. How are you? So, it's I know we when we get information from law enforcement, we tend to hang on every word. I get it. I totally understand that. I understand people who do that. I understand people who want to dissect everything and read into everything. That's not always a good thing by doing that, however. And it can be detrimental. But I don't believe in all these coincidences that are surrounding Richard Allen. I don't believe it. I don't believe it's a coincidence at all. So there's a lot of problems with Carroll County, you guys. And there's just I don't know if you guys heard or not, but there was a county council meeting that happened back on March. They met in their regular session on March 16th with a full agenda. And but it got really heated at the end. When the recorder, Penny Titus, approached the council After all the business had been concluded, she informed council members that the person who was supposed to be hired as the trial secretary for the prosecutor in this case, and who Nick McClelland required an additional $5,000 for to the regular secretarial wage for the position, did not end up taking the job. And Nick McClelland is the prosecutor in this case, and he previously persuaded the council to approve the increased amount for the new temporary hire. And he said she didn't need any training. It would save the county time and money. It was determined the county must pay each secretary the same amount if they work from the same job description. And there was no suggestion that the new person might have a different job description. And Titus said many in the courthouse were upset about the matter, and that she said the increase in pay for both positions should be null and void. Because 2 more meetings were scheduled for the meeting room beginning at noon, the council decided to have a special meeting on Monday, March 20th at 1 p.m. And the second meeting began with a review of this situation. And council members Lawrence Doc Stauffer and Scott Ayers described the approval of the $5,000 for each secretary as being approved under false pretenses. Prosecutor Nick McClelland told the governing body he has hired the secretary in the office who was to receive this extra $5,000 per year because of the job description to be the trial secretary. He said both he and she understand the position is a temporary one. And then he informed council that he had replaced the new trial secretary with another secretarial worker in his office, and both would receive the enhanced wages. Titus said the council has always maintained that they pay a position and not a person. She said again they should adhere to their own rule and not pay 2 people more money because of a trial. Ayers said because of the false pretense for which the positions were being paid more because of McClelland's assertion that the one he was going to hire was already trained and could do the work needed immediately upon beginning, he was in favor of reducing the pay to its previous amount. Stauffer and Tracy Martin agreed with him. Josh Plew explained at length that the council should not be the reason that the prosecutor's office suffers a mistrial because they would not pay enough money to a secretary. Boy, that's concerning. McClelland said there is a tremendous amount of paperwork that must be done for discovery and other essential trial matters. And Martin said he now has 2 secretaries to do that work, and he can hire another part-time clerical worker. McClelland said he has 3 trials in 3 weeks after spring break, and he is pushed for time. He said he has not hired another prosecutor for the office, although that position was approved earlier by the council. And Martin made a motion to rescind the $5,000 pay for each of the secretaries, and Ayers provided the second. When the vote was taken, Stauffer, Plew, and Tim Radcliffe voted to keep the level of funding for the positions. Ayers and Martin voted to rescind the funds. Ethan Brown and Paul Ryder did not attend the meeting, and the motion failed, and the 2 secretaries will begin making the additional money as of February 3rd of this year, according to Beth Myers, the auditor. The next council meeting is going to be this Thursday, April 20th at 10 a.m. And trust me, if you haven't watched these council meetings, you need to watch this county council and how it does business. You can watch them on YouTube on the Debbie Lowe channel. And I'm here to tell you, you won't be disappointed. There is some major problems within this county. And I'm just saying, it's just absolutely ridiculously crazy. I just can't even say. And if this case gets derailed because of clerical crap or staffing issues. I can't even imagine having to go to the family and tell them that. Hey, Babs Forever, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, thank you. Hey, Tech Death, how are you, my dear? So good to see you. I just thought that was really important. There's another council meeting on Thursday morning. I guarantee you I'm going to be watching that one just to see what's playing out, if they talk about the trial at all. A lot of times we get information, some information anyway, from these things, but what it tells me more or less is just how badly this county is ran. And that's just my, as an outsider looking in, I just can't even begin to tell you. It's a mess. So let's just pray and hope that I still say that he needs help. Nick McClellan needs to hire another prosecutor. He needs to get a special prosecutor. I hope he's listening out there somewhere. He needs to get somebody who has experience in such a high profile case as this, because he has no experience. And I am just, I get so emotional when I think about it, because we've gotten this far. We don't want to see things derail. And I guess I wanted to ask you guys what your thoughts are on the timeline on Richard Allen. You can put your comments below the live. You can put them in the live stream chat. But those who are watching the replay, let me know what your thoughts are. I'd like to know what everybody thinks about all of this. And do they feel that the timeline is speaking the truth about what happened that day? Because I do. I honestly, I have no doubts anymore about it being him at all. I don't even think I did from day one when they announced it. But the more I got to see, and after the probable cause affidavit was released and we got all of that information, I think it just solidified it more in my mind of what was going on. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about this, on the airwaves, and there's been a lot of people, that are still talking about other things. But no, this is, to me, makes the most sense. And truly it's a lot. It's hard for new people that come into this case. One of the things that bothers me is that we're always getting new people into the Delphi case, that this is their first time hearing of the case. And it's really hard for new people to participate in a discussion that you know very little about. And the stark reality about Delphi is that there is so many different narratives out there about this case from day one to now, that it's hard for the new people to figure out what the heck is going on in this case. There was so little knowledge put out there, or information put out there by law enforcement for 5.5 years. And because of that, there was a lot of fake, fraud, whatever you want to call it, information that was put into a narrative, and people followed it and ran with it. And that's hard. Richard Allen has not been on the radar as a suspect in this case publicly before he was arrested. We did not know about him. Nobody was talking about him on social media. Nobody was discussing him. Now, I know that there has been some recent talk about some 4chan texts that were out there where somebody was talking about a Richard back in 2020. I'm not convinced that that is him, but it could be. But that's not something that was well known, well publicized. He was just out of the blue. And when the court decided to seal everything in this case, going back to sealing the autopsy, really clamping down and not giving anybody information about the crime scene, everything has been so held to the vest, which is what Indiana is known for. This is how they handle their murder cases. It's not something that's unusual for the state of Indiana to do. But you know, it's just one of those things that make things more difficult, in my opinion, to keep new people interested and abreast of what's going on in a case. And yeah, Deb, exactly. I've always felt it was a local person. I still feel Evansdale is a local person. I never thought it was not a local person. I will be honest and state that. I always did think it was local. Because of the remoteness of where the girls were and where they were found, and that if you didn't know that place was there, you wouldn't know. Hi, Roki girl. You are so welcome. Thank you so much. I am all about justice for Abby and Libby. They deserve nothing less. The families are the ones that are suffering. The girls are in heaven, in my opinion, and are no longer suffering. And now it's all about everyone who's left behind, their family and friends. And this is all for them. You know, this is something they have to live with every single day. And to not know what happened and why and who did it, it's not something that is easy to live with, for sure. Why a 50-year-old man would choose to do this crime, I have no idea. Why anybody would choose to do these types of crimes, I don't know. But Richard Allen lived 5 minutes from the bridge. And who would have ever known or thought that this would have happened to those two beautiful friends who went out for just a good time, as teenagers do, and never came home? I mean, yeah, it was a local guy. And the sad thing, another thing that Maria and I have talked about so much, is how bad it is for them to realize that this is a person they knew. This is a person that these people interacted with. Stop and think about this small community and how many people got their pharmaceuticals from CVS. How many people went in there to get pictures done? How many people went in there to buy greeting cards, or, you know, to buy cigarettes, or to pick up a few groceries or milk or whatever it might have been? The people knew this guy. And I go back to what Anna said back in February of this year, when she was interviewed, and she said the worst thing that she thought about was, what happens if we end up finding this person and it turns out that we knew him or knew of him. And that was that interview was last February. in February of 2022 when she said that, near the anniversary, the 5th year anniversary. And I won't ever forget that. And, Doug Carter was adamant on October 31st when he stood up there at that podium and he said, today's not a day to celebrate. He said that the investigation was long and complex and that this was a step toward a conclusion. And he did say that today was the day. And I think in any murder investigation, once an arrest has been made, they continue to investigate. They continue to look at any leads that are coming in to make sure that no other persons or person could have been involved, whether beforehand or after the fact. Did they help conceal? Because they want everyone held accountable. And one of the things that Doug Carter said in that press conference announcing his arrest was that he hoped that Richard Allen's arrest would bring the girls' families a measure of peace. And I think what it's done is brought them more anxiety and more unsure unsurety is what I want to say, because if anything, it's still all up in the air as to how this is going to play out, because we still don't know everything. And, right after the arrest was made, Becky made a Facebook post. And Becky said, "At long last, we have a face to go with our monster." And, no one knows what that feels like if you haven't been through it. So I've heard so many people complain about everything being sealed and everything being hush hush and all these records, not being out there. But if they are still investigating this case to see if somebody else was helping Richard Allen or if he was involved with some other people or whatever, you can understand why they wanted things sealed and why they wanted to keep things close to the vest. They want to preserve the integrity of their case and their investigation, and I'm all for that because I want everything to be preserved. And, authorities still have not told us when Richard Allen actually became on their radar in this case. So we don't know that yet. So we know that that he lived 5 minutes from the bridge. We also know that he lived previously in Peru, Indiana, Greenwood, Indiana, and Mexico, Indiana. We know that he purchased his house that he was living in Delphi for cash and that it had been assessed at $142,800. We know he's a licensed pharmacy tech in Indiana. We've had people say that he's not. He is, but we know for a fact that he holds a pharmacy tech license in the state of Indiana. And it was issued in February of 2018, a year after the murders. Many people in Delphi have posted lots of information on forums online that they've seen him at the store, that they interacted with him at the store. We know that Libby's aunt went to the store to have photographs made for the memory boards, and that he waited on her and told her there would be no charge for the pictures, which just sends chills up my spine. And some woman wrote on one of the Reddit subs that she had interacted with him multiple times in the Peru store when he worked there. And she said that he was very nice and helpful, but that she had a small bad vibe inside of her about him, whatever that means. There are just, like I said, there are a lot of twists and turns in this case. The two sketches and why that is. I will be glad when that gets explained to us, and how they go about explaining that. But yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, I'm sure he did. He did. It's crazy. It's very scary for sure. Yeah, I know. Miracle Hearts too. That's one of the things that really, really got to me was, everybody was all about how he could sit or work in front of his wanted poster. He interacted with her aunt, and he probably processed those photos and made those copies. That is what is absolutely hard to wrap your head around as a sane individual. So, hey, Lewis, how are you? Good to see you. Yeah, Mitzi, you're right. You're right. These guys are very good at compartmentalizing their lives, from the violent person to the family man, and the good employee and the good constituent, whatever. And he obviously was able to do it. He was able to do it for 5.5 years. And I've said it before, he had no idea they were coming for him. I think he thought he had gotten away with it. And, he didn't even try to deny any of the fact that he was there that day. He didn't try to deny what he was wearing. He just, it's crazy. It really, truly is. Yeah, no guilt, no sorrow. No remorse. None. So you guys, that's really what I wanted to talk about tonight. To me, it's self-explanatory, and it screams what it is. And I'm glad they've moved him, because I want him treated humanely, and I want him healthy so that he's able to stand trial. I don't want him being mistreated. I don't want him to have any sort of claim against Indiana and the state of Indiana on his care prior to trial, as he is innocent until proven guilty. So he has indelible human rights and civil rights, and you cannot do those things to people before they've been found guilty. And that's what our Constitution affords us, each and every one of us as citizens. And so, it's super important that we never forget that, because that's part of what makes America the place that it is. When you have seen other areas of the world and how things happen there, and how you could be stolen out of your house in the middle of the night by law enforcement and taken away from your family, not given a day or a voice in court, and stuck in a hole somewhere to never be heard from again. That happens. That happens in other countries. It doesn't happen here. So, yeah, Maria's right. The only official word is that they brought in a team of detectives, cold case detectives, whatever you want to call it, to look back over all the case files. And they came across his original statement that was made to law enforcement that was never followed up on, except for that initial interview, and that he had placed himself that day wearing the same clothes of Bridge Guy. And that's what we have been told. So we will have to wait again to find out all of that. And like I said, when we do, it's going to be really interesting. Boston, I agree with you. I hope that law enforcement has checked all of that. I am sure once they found out that he worked in a pharmacy as a manager, they were probably making sure of all of that. I'm pretty sure they would go back and look. They're going to look at all of that. In fact, they're going to go and look at every single part of his life, going back to when he was a child. I mean, they're going to examine him and see what else they know and can find out about this guy. And that's one of the things too that's kind of been odd for me, is that it's not like he's had a ton of friends coming out of the woodwork standing up for him and saying, there's no way that Richard Allen did this. I know him. There's no way he could have done this. I'm floored that there's not people, friends of his or whatever, that is coming out and saying those things. So that too makes you have to wonder what's going on, right? Well, guys, it's been a great night. And I really appreciate all of you being here again, as always. And I think that that's where I'm going to leave it with you tonight. I hope that you all have a great rest of your week. I probably will be here on Thursday night. As far as I know now, there may be a slight chance that I won't be, so don't be surprised. I'm not going to be here on Thursday night. I will leave a message on my community page on the channel to let you guys know that I won't be, but I'll definitely be here on Saturday. And anytime you guys want to comment, like I said, if you think of something later on that comes to mind, drop it in the comments below the live stream. I try to answer all my comments. It's getting a little bit harder because I'm getting a lot more email as the channel continues to grow, which you guys, I'm just so thankful for all of you. I cannot believe how much the channel has grown over the last 2.5 months. It's just insane to me, but I appreciate all of you. And for those of you who have been buying my merchandise on my store, thank you so much. That makes me happy. I love my I love my hat. And this is on my store. If you guys want one, it comes in white and it also comes in black. But yeah, thank you guys for everything. I really do appreciate all of you so much. And I'm glad that you spend your nights here with me for a couple of hours and we can talk about these cases. That was something else that I wanted to tell you guys about from Saturday night with the Alexis Scott case. I do have some updates that I'm going to be talking about on the next show with her, that I was able to find out some more information and get a little bit more in depth with her case. So I do want to talk about that. But I did put out a short on her case today. I'm going to start doing shorts on missing people. So make sure to look out for those. Please hit the subscribe button and the like on your way out. Those two things really help keep me in YouTube's algorithm so that people hear about my channel, and share my live streams on your social so that more people learn about us. But I appreciate all of you. I have a great community here. You guys are all wonderful, and it's always so down to earth. Nobody is mean to anyone, and it's great. I love it. So thank you guys. Have a good evening, and I will see you all later. To all my moderators, thank you so much for your support. I love each and every one of you. Thank you so much for being here.